Hey everyone, this is Dion here with Racers 360. Today we're going to be breaking down Chuckwalla Valley Raceway. It's a very technical racetrack and it's got a lot of things going on here that are critical to a quick lap. And for a driver, having good eye foundation is really important here. Being able to look through corners, especially in 1 and 2, 4 and 5, and then in 16, 17 on the front straightaway. Those are very complex corners and ones where it's easy to get behind the car. So if you're going to be fast here, making sure that we've got good eye discipline is really critical. The other thing to know is it gets really hot here. And this track, when it gets hot, especially in the afternoon, the grip level goes down quite a lot, and that means car control is pretty important, especially trail braking into corners and being able to kind of control it right at the limit becomes pretty critical to not only being fast when it's a really quick track, but also in the heat of the day. So let's go ahead and start breaking this down turn by turn so you can know all of the secrets that pro drivers use to be fast around Chuckwalla Valley Raceway. So let's go ahead into turn 1. We want to be trying to be full throttle just until we start to turn in so with the car pointed towards the turn 1 apex before we start to brake. So you can see our turning points, you can see right here at the 2 board, just past the 2 board, and we're starting to bend it in and then really kind of feeding it in right about the 1.5 board. So we can see right now, as we got the car pointed towards our apex point in turn 1, which comes roughly about mid-curb here, that's where we want to start, have a hard initial brake and then start trailing off almost right away. So we have a hard initial brake here. You can see we're going to apex right about mid-curb here on our left. The next critical thing here is it's very easy to apex too early into turn 2. So we want to continue to hold it left about a car length or 2 past the turn 1 apex curve on our left here before turning it back into the right. So you can see here, we're going to hold it left, we're going to hold it left, and then now we have our turning point, but our turning point is going to be very slow with our hands because we want to have that pretty late apex, almost 2/3 of around the apex curve. The next thing is turn 1 and 2 are both pretty much full entry speed corners. So I don't want to touch the throttle until I get all the way around to that apex curve, apex point, and I'm only really getting back to full throttle as I get out to the exit curve here. So you can see if we go a little bit farther forward. In fact, I actually want to go back in slow motion here. See how we're going straight? We have a kind of a little bit of a turn, and then we start to really turn more aggressively. So turn 2, we want to start bending it in, but we don't want to be too aggressive for that turn because you'll see we'll apex too early. And I want to apex much farther around the corner. So I've got that initial turn, and then now as I come towards the apex, I turn more aggressively. Now is my apex point. Yes, the cone is perfectly placed right now, but back this up, that cone is the apex. I don't like to rely on cones. Those are easy to get knocked off. They're not always in the same place. So it's very much of a field corner for apex point. And this is where our initial throttle comes in. And then notice how we're going to use all of that track on exit, and we're trying to get back to full throttle before that exit curve. So now heading into turn 3. Turn 3 is a corner that it's very easy to actually bring in too much entry speed. Yes, it's totally got a lot of entry speed to it. It's a fast corner, very light brake zone. In fact, here I'm turning in flat and then with a light brake. But don't let that sucker you in to not focusing on getting a run down to turn 4 as well. It's a pretty decent long straightaway here. So what we're going to look for is being able to pick up initial throttle at the apex point and then getting back to full throttle before the exit curve. So you can see we're starting to turn it in here roughly about 2 car lengths before the end of this curve here on our left. And our apex point comes roughly around the middle of the curve. So we're bending it in, light, long brake zone here, trailing it in so we can get that rotation. You can see here we're going to hold this apex. Right now, as I'm starting to unwind the steering wheel, that's where my initial throttle comes in, and I want to be back to full throttle right about here. The next point is one very critical piece of information, especially in turns 3, out of turns 14, 15, out of turn 5, is we really want to get out to our exit curbs early. It's very easy to not get your eyes up looking far forward early as possible, cause you to use all of the road, but that means you're going to probably only get out to the exit curb and be parallel with them much later than we'd like to see. Now you're hurting yourself on corner exits. So start to get out. See how we're out to this exit curve pretty much from the start of it? Now we're going to start getting back to the right side of the road to set up for turn 4. So turn 4 and 5, they're really kind of one corner. We want you to treat them more as one corner than two separate corners. And getting your eyes up looking through the corner in turn 4 is critical because we want to make sure that we're opening our hands as early as possible in between 4 and 5, getting the square to full throttle, getting our hands straight for a little bit before turning back in for turn 5. So into our brake zone here, coming right about the 1 board. Now, again, brake zones are going to be drastically dependent on your car, your tire grip, your downforce, how much horsepower you've got, depending on a lot of things. But I think for most cars, in between the 2-1 boards, somewhere in that region is going to be a good initial brake zone here. So hard initial brake zone, but we're coming off of that heavy brake pressure very early here so we can trail brake deep into the corner. So we're going to start to turn in right about mid-curb here on our right. And it's going to feel like a decently early apex here, but I want the car to start pushing me out so that I can get out to the exit curb out of 4 early so I get my hands straight for a little bit and a square to full throttle for a little bit before turning into turn 5. So I'm still trail braking. See how it's a very slow, progressive turn in. I've turned in decently early, but I'm not apexing very early in the curve. Well, I'm still apexing earlier than you might think, but you can see how it's not immediate. We're starting to get down, get down, get down. Here's my apex point, and I want to start to feed the throttle in as I'm starting to push away from this turn 4 exit curve. Now, the critical part here is right now, my eyes are looking out over here. They're looking for that exit curve. If you're still looking here, your eyes are way too low in turn 4. So looking through the corner, starting to let it drift out. You can see right now, I'm starting to have that oversteer moment as I start to feed the throttle in. It's in the heat of the day. There's not much grip out there. Just expect that when you go to this racetrack, especially when it starts to get, more spring, summertime, and into early fall. So now we're starting to apply the throttle. See how I'm getting away from that turn 4 apex curve already? And I'm going to get out to that exit curve. See how where it starts? The exit curve here starts, and we're immediately almost parallel with it from the start. That is going to give us more time to be parallel with it. That was a pretty bad job of drawing a parallel line. Parallel with it, and a square to full throttle here before turning back in for 5. So we want to get back to full throttle a little bit, and then as we turn in for 5, starting to lift off that throttle smoothly. Starting to turn in for turn 5. That's roughly 2 car lengths or so before the end of the curve on our right. And again, looking through the corner into turn 5, it's a pretty late apex. Look at that moment we have here. So just be prepared. If you're going to drop, if you're going to try to use that curve out to your right there, you can really cause a big oversteer moment as you turn off of it. That caused me a pretty big moment, full opposite lock for a little bit. But you can see, your eyes are looking forward here. It's a pretty late apex in turn 5. This is where we're getting back to throttle, getting back to significant throttle. We want to use all of the road out of turn 5, but we got to hustle it back to turn 6. See how my hands never get straight. I'm going to continue to turn, and now I'm still kind of going a little bit left here as we're braking towards turn 6. Brake zones will be just before the start of our curve out here to our left. And 6 and 7 are also like one long corner, and one that, again, we need our eyes looking far forward. It's very easy to get your eyes too low, over slow into 7, and then to be disconjointed in these corners. So have a nice long trail brake, hard initial brake, starting to trail off pretty late apex around here to turn 6, right about just past mid-curve. Right now, we want our eyes looking far forward through to turn 7 turning point. So we'll let the car drift out, and we're not trying to get back to throttle in between turn 6 and 7. If you do this correctly, you're going to be trail braking to about this point, a little bit of coast, and as we head back into our turn 7 apex, that's where we're starting to feed the throttle in now as we head towards our apex. And our apex in turn 7 is pretty late so that we can get back to full throttle as early as possible. So bam, getting back to our apex point, no great signal here of where it really is. It's just pretty late around here. And then as we're starting to unwind the steering wheel, that's where we want to start to get back to full throttle. Again, getting out to this exit curve as early as possible. As we head to 10-8, at turn turn 8 and 9. We really want to trail brake deep in here and bring in that entry speed. Ideally, we're not getting back to throttle until after the apex in turn 9 here. So we're coming in, our eyes are looking far forward here again. We're braking just past the 1 board in most cars. We're going to start to turn in. You can see our turn-in point comes pretty soon, like right around where the start of the curve here on our left is. And it's going to be a slow turn-in so we can maximize our entry speed into turn 8. So into turn 8, I care more about bringing in entry speed than really being perfectly close to this right side curve. If you're off the curve by a third of a car width, about a tire width or two, that's all right. Yes, ideally I want to get down there, but sometimes that causes me to overslow the corner, and then that means I've got to get back to throttle before I turn into turn 9, which I don't want to do. So my emphasis here is bringing an entry speed and trying to not get back to throttle until after the apex point in turn 9. So we get close to that apex curve here in turn 8, right about mid-curve or kind of apexing middle to the back end of it, and then we don't need to hold it perfectly to the right. See how I end up about mid-road here? I definitely don't want to be any further to the left than where I am right now, but mid-road's okay to turn back into turn 9. Turn 9 is a pretty late apex, and it's really tight here. It's very easy to not see where you don't see where the road's going. You can't see it at all, and it's such a fast section coming into here that it's really easy to bring too much apex speed into turn 9 and fly off the road on the exit of turn 9 here. Exit of turn 9. So, especially if you're new to Chuckwalla, make sure you're really checking it down. It's almost like a first gear corner, very, very slow. Just be a heads up, your first lap out there, it's a very slow corner, way slower than it looks on video. So just be aware of that. So we want a pretty late apex in here. See how we're trying to be smooth with our hand, but we only want to apex as the road is starting to crest right about here, and we want to bring enough speed so that we use all the road on exit. Don't worry about holding it even more left here to set for turn 10. Not necessary at all. We want to bring enough speed so we're using all the road, and I'm only really getting back to throttle right about here, and it's a very, very short squirt of throttle. The most important thing at this point right now is getting that exit out of turn 10 so we can get our run onto the next small straightaway. So small squirt of throttle, and then as you turn in, we're lifting, very light brake zone. Some cars you might even be able to just lift. I want enough speed here to where I just ever so slightly come away from that apex curve. I'm about a tire width off the apex curve right now. And as I bleed off that speed, the car will start to come back in towards the apex. And as the car is coming back in towards the apex, which is right about now, I'm feeding that throttle back in, and I want to be back to full throttle right about where this cone is, which is really where the apex is. Back to full throttle and opening our hands, getting out to that exit curve early so we can maximize our run out towards turns 11, 12, and into the bowl in 13 here. So a little bit uphill into 11. Again, another corner with a lot of entry speed, another kind of chicane. This one's going to be faster than turns 8 and 9, mostly because the left-hander here is a lot more open. So we're going to be coming in, braking just past the 2 board or so. I'm actually right at the 2 board right now in the brake zone, and we want to be braking, trailing it off pretty soon. We'll be turning in about mid-curve and trying to trail brake to about here, just before the apex. But it's all about entry speed. So if you need to coast to bring in that entry speed, that is totally okay. So rolling it in, and I'm trying to not get back to throttle until the apex, which is right here. You can see that's pretty late around this corner, about 2/3 of the way. Squirt a full throttle, and then as I'm turning into 13, which is right as the road is cresting, that's where I want to lift, wait, about apexing about a car length or 2 past the start of the apex curve here. Car length, 2 car lengths. That's where we're feeding the throttle back in, aggressively back to full throttle. Use all of the road on exit because we don't really need to get all the way back to the left side of the road to set up for the bowl here. So, yes, I want to hustle it back to the left. Don't need to get all the way back to the left. It's more important to get that, maximize our run through turn 12 here. Get that back to the left. You can see I'm getting about 2/3 of the way over. And now we have a ton of camber here in the bowl. we want to use that camber to slow the car down. There's a lot of grip here. So in this car, and we have a little bit of downforce, I'm actually not even braking. And I think a lot of cars, you don't need a brake here when the conditions are pretty good. When it's in the morning, the tires are pretty good, you'll be able to get away most likely with just the lift. As the heat comes up and as the tires wear, you might need a very, very light brake zone, but let's use the banking to help slow the car down. So the critical thing here is we want to bring enough speed in to where we're not getting close to this apex curb until we're very far around the corner. We want to be about a car width or even more away from that apex curve, bringing enough speed in so the car takes us up the banking, and then we can start to drop down the banking, have that apex, but be able to get back to full throttle before that late apex. So we're maximizing our entries and exits here. So you can see here, I've actually turned in full throttle. Here comes my lift as I start to kind of be pointed up the hill. And you'll see, I'm not really that close to the curb. I'm about a half car width to a car width away. I'm letting the car drift up the banking. And right now, as I start to come down towards that apex point, that's where I'm feeding in the throttle. Back to full throttle here. Eyes up, use all of the track on exit. And then we got to hustle it back to the right side of the road for turn 14 here. As we get back to the right side of the road, our braking point comes roughly about 2 car lengths or so before that curb starts on our right-hand side, braking. And now 14, really critical, deep trail brake and opening our hands as early as possible in here. So we're going to start to turn in right about mid-curve. We're going to be having a pretty late apex around here. So slow hands on initial turn in, trail braking all the way down to this point right now. This is where the throttle comes in. You can see it's pretty late apex. We want to use all of the road on exit and get out there as early as possible. See how we're getting out to the exit curb right at the start? That is critical. A lot of drivers will get out to the exit curb, but they'll only get out there at the end of it, and they're giving up time on exit and entry because of that. So make sure you're getting out to that exit curb early. So now, coming into the next left-hander here, turn 15, we want to lift right around the start, or start braking, sorry, right around the start of this curb here on our right. We're going to be turning in about a car length or 2 later. Another corner where we want slow hands and a decently late apex. See how I'm still not apexing? Now comes my apex, so about just past mid-curb or so, feeding that throttle in, and then getting out to the exit curb as well. So now we're coming into the final 2 corners, turn 16 and 17. Really important to have our eyes looking through the corner. A long trail brake into 16, enough entry speed so the car is pushing us wider. And then we want to really trail brake and start to get the rotation of the car as the pit entry line starts, blend line starts. And as we start to head back to 17, we're starting to get back to initial throttle and getting back to full throttle right around the apex point in 17. So you can see we're getting back to the left side of the road. I don't care about getting very close to this apex curve in 16. I'm going to be braking here in a straight line. And you can see, well, not straight line, but in a straighter line. And by having less steering input here, I can roll more entry speed. And that's why I don't care much about getting down to this apex curve. So I want to have a little bit less steering input, trying to roll that speed. After I get just about 2 car lengths, 3 car lengths past the start of that apex curve, you'll see the car is going to start to take me wider, I'm about a car width and a half, maybe 2, but just about a car width and a half off the inside. And this is where my maximum arc is. I don't want to use all of the track out to my left. I'm right about mid-road, about a car width off the apex, and I'm about a car width off the outside of the road. Any further out there, you'll start to get into the marbles and be dirty, and you can see how it gets very light asphalt out there, which means it's not as grippy. And I want to hold it out here, hold it out here, hold it out here. So now we can start to see that pit entry blend line I was referencing early starts right here. So you can see that's roughly where my left side tires are. But as we start to get out to it, that's where we're going to start to feed, we'll start to rotate the car, and we'll start to head towards that turn 17 apex. So right around there, we want to start to get down to that turn 17 apex. As we're heading towards it, I'm starting to feed that throttle in. I'm apexing right here. Again, no great markers. It's right about where the farthest left the curb gets. So just before, how it's further out left there, just before there is where I'm apexing. And I'm trying to get back to full throttle right now. And we don't need to hold the car right here to set up for this next left-hander. It's a pretty easy flat-out corner. So you can see I'm using all of the track, and that's what's allowing me to pick up that throttle and get back to full throttle because it is pushing me out further left, but I can do that and continue to be full throttle through this left-hander because it's pretty easy flat corner, and that's what drives me getting that good run onto the front straightaway here. So that's been our Racers 360 track breakdown at Chuckwalla Valley Raceway. We hope you found a lot of value out of it. And if you're driving out here, we would love to work with you. It's really easy to work with our pro coaches at Racers 360. Simply take an onboard video, just like this. We filmed it with a GoPro, your iPhone, and even an AIM Smarty Cam. Whatever you've got, you can send in your video to Racers 360, and our pro coaches, you'll be working with some of the best coaches in the business. Memo Gidley, Mike Skeen, Jay Buford, some really top-class people, and they're going to go turn by turn, like exactly what I did here, and talk about how we can improve your technique and your lines to help you find speed and be safer on the racetrack. And we can work with any car at any track in the world. So if you're going to Chuckwalla, or if you're out in any other racetrack, you can send in your video to our pro coaches at Racers 360. We'll be excited to work with you, and you can join the hundreds of other drivers that have found over a second a lap through just one video at Racers 360. If you have any questions, email us at team@Racers360 or check out Racers360.com to learn more.